Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Uninsured Ankles podcast. I am Josh Barton. Joining me tonight is Haley Everett. We're basically running like the Denver Nuggets, starting Facundo Campazzo and Austin Rivers at two guard. Haley, you ready to be my Aaron Gordon?
I mean, I was kind of hoping that you were going to be the Jokic and I was going to be the Murray, but we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, no Jordan, no Nick tonight. Jordan is apparently out of the hookah bars with Luca. Nick is meeting up with his namesake Nico Harrison in Dallas to talk about how much they hate Luca. So that's probably the only time Luca's going to get mentioned tonight. Maybe. But yeah, excited to get into it. A couple things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the question that blew my mind last pod. Who's better all time, Nikola Jokic versus Larry Bird? I was actually MIA for 3 days. I was in a deep cave in Serbia researching this question. So I'm interested to see your reaction to my take, Haley. Then we're going to get into a segment I'm really excited about. I've entitled Naming Guys, where Haley and I are going to go deep cuts into the guys the casuals don't even know exist. You ready, Haley?
Let's get it.
Alrighty. So, question that Nick posed to me last pod. Who is better all time? Nikola Jokic versus Larry Bird. At first glance, or at first thought, my brain just malfunctioned and I couldn't speak, I couldn't think. But I broke down the numbers, I thought about it, consulted chat GPT like a good professional should. And here's where I landed. So, to read their resumes real quick, Larry Bird is, of course, in the Hall of Fame. Nikola Jokic will one day be in the Hall of Fame. Bird has 12 All-Stars to his name, 10 All-NBAs. He's a three-time champion and a three-time MVP. The only guy, one of three guys in NBA history to win three consecutive MVPs. Jokic, on the other hand, is a also a three-time MVP, seven-time All-Star, six-time All-NBA. Bird has the three championships. They didn't mention that. Jokic only has the one. Um, so numbers wise, it would seem that the edge is to Bird. ChatGPT, I'll read their conclusion. They said it is difficult to definitively say who is better because both have changed the game in their own ways. Bird is likely more historically impactful player with his three championships and unmatched skill set for his era. Jokic, on the other hand, is a modern day marvel and may continue to build his legacy and further championships and individual accolades. And I think that kind of hits the point. The championships are definitely in Bird's favor. The MVPs are matched right now. It'll be interesting to see if Jokic can top him this year. In terms of best statistical season, Bird's best statistical season was 84-85, 28 points a game, six and a half assists a game, and 10 and a half rebounds. And unsurprisingly, won the MVP that season. And the Celtics were the best team in the league, but they did not win the championship that year. Sad day for Celtics fan. Jokic's best season is currently happening right now. Uh, we're recording this pod on the day that the Celtics and the Nuggets played this afternoon, and they flashed this graphic at the very beginning of the game. Jokic is top three in the league in points, rebounds, and assists, which is insane. He's at 29 points a game, 12 rebounds a game, and 10 and a half assists a game. So numbers wise, the edge would go to probably go to Jokic. Here's the big thing where I landed. Larry Bird's all-star teammates. So these are guys who were named all-stars in the year in which they played with Larry Bird. We have Dave Cowens, Tiny Archibald, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge, Reggie Lewis. Seven guys. Let me read you the list of guys who were all-stars in the same season they played with Nikola Jokic. Let me scroll. Let me scroll. Let me get to it. Let me translate from Serbian. Oh, I'm sorry. There is no one. Um, as ChatGPT mentioned, it's hard to compare the eras. I think of all the guys who are considered legends of the game, I think Bird is probably the guy if you plug him in today's era would just be an absolute like country boy Luca with a drinking problem, which also might be Luca. I think Bird would be amazing in today's like pace and space era, but I think Nikola Jokic has surpassed Larry Bird. As crazy
Ooh.
as it to say, me as a diehard Celtics fan, this what Nikola Jokic has done without an all-star teammate, you can argue, Jamal Murray plays like an all-star in the playoffs. Aaron Gordon was a borderline all-star. Bird played with seven all-stars during his time. Plus, you factor in guys who are at the end of their careers, like Pete Maravich and Bill Walton,
Hmm.
um, where Jokic has had very little help. I made the composite joke at the top, and I think that illustrates it. He has carried a bunch of plumbers and electricians to be good NBA teams. And it's as crazy as to say, I think Jokic is a better player all time than Larry Bird. Haley, how crazy am I?
Oh, so when the question was first posed, my gut reaction was his career has already been better than Jokic's career has already been better than Bird's.
Mm,
Um, and then I started doing a little more digging, and you summarized kind of some of the, for lack of a better word, the things that Larry might get docked for, or the things that might elevate Jokic's resume, and a lot of that has to do with their teammates, which I find really interesting because
mhm,
Jokic is undoubtedly one of the best players in the world at making his teammates better. I mean, I wouldn't say he resurrected Aaron Gordon's career, but he certainly elevated Aaron Gordon's career. He did kind of resurrect Russ's career for most
mhm,
of this year. I know he's hitting a little downslope in the past few weeks as teams have started game plan for him more, but he certainly elevated a lot of guys. Everybody who's played with him has been, I think, significantly better with him. Good example might be Bruce Brown, who has
mm,
disappeared off the face of the earth since he doesn't play with them anymore. I know he's had some injury problems, but still, like, just non-existent at this point. KCP also has not
mm,
been that good for the Magic. Before the year, I know this is going down a rabbit hole. Before the year, we were talking about KCP as a difference maker for the Magic, and their biggest difference maker is Franz and Suggs, and I have some bias against Bankero, but the statistics, the advanced stats would say that that's accurate. Franz and Suggs are
mm,
the guys who make the difference for them. But just kind of speaking specifically to, you see a guy go into what you would think would be a good situation for him, and KCP going to the Magic where he's going to be a spacer and hasn't been a super productive player this year. And it's not like he's on his last leg or anything. So I'm gonna reel that back in to say, um, I think Jokic will get there. I don't think he's there today. I don't think we can
mm,
definitively put him, because if you put him above Bird, you're essentially saying that he's as good or better than Magic too. Because Bird and Magic are right there in the, yeah, like you can't speak one of their names without saying the other. And I think basketball historians know that they really saved professional basketball. Um, and not to say that they were like the first or the last, but when professional basketball hit a rut, they were the two who really brought the energy into it, and they
mm,
drug in some NCAA fans, some college fans into the NBA, and but not just that, like Bird's skill was. A lot of people I think of him more of a jump shooter because that's the highlights that we most often see, but you read about Bird and he was like an honest to goodness one of the best athletes the game had seen. He's quick, he could jump, he like had vision and style. His style of play was exciting.
mhm,
Probably not as exciting as Magic, but it was as exciting as you could possibly be. And that was the guy he was competing against, was one of the most exciting players the league's ever seen. So The other thing in Bird's favor, the three all defensive teams where Jokic doesn't have one, um, I will kind of lament that a bit though. Not against Bird. Bird's defense was legendary, but
Mm,
Jokic's defense is much better than he's given credit for. Uh,
100%.
yeah, and I know probably over the past like 3 seasons, 4 seasons. I think Aaron Gordon has gotten more credit for and KCP before this year, but got a lot of credit for their defensive success, and even Bruce Brown prior to that, because they do things that you kind of naturally imagine as good defenders. Oh, they're quick, they're able to get up and contest at the rim, they get steals, stuff like that. And like Jokic is one of the top handful of guys every year in deflections. He gets in passing lanes. He also just sees the game better than everybody else. And if you watch Jokic enough, he's a defensive anchor the way that Draymond Green is kind of, barking orders at his people. Jokic knows where people need to rotate. He knows where he needs to get to. Obviously, he's got some uh foot quickness that we, lacking at times, but still he obviously sees the game and is still as much of the most important player on that end of the court for the Nuggets as he is on the other end. So, um, all that to say, I think he'll get there. I think you give him another couple years, it's going to be really hard to not give him another MVP at some point.
Hmm.
I know this year the odds are heavily favoring SGA, which I think there's a lot of r reason not to give it to him. I'm not, I understand the team success has been great, but um, his his team is ridiculous, which we've gone at length discussing on our pod. But anyways, all that to say, I think Jokic can get there. I think another ship would do him a lot of good for his for the narrative once he actually retires. And but yeah, I mean, for us, and I know we were talking about just briefly discussing style of play. I think for our generation, we grew up in watching the what we thought were, the craziest athletes of all time. The Vince Carters, the LeBron Jameses as he matured, Tracy McGrady, and then like there were pogo sticks every year who we were swearing were going to be the next big thing, where whether it's like Tyrus Thomas or Josh Smith or the list goes on and on. I could rattle off plenty more, but it's just the style that we were used to, Jokic, and there's a number of other people, but Jokic and Luka and SGA, they all play this very methodical style, and it's they each have their own version of it, but it's slower. And not to say that they're not quick or that they're not athletic, it's just that they are a lot more controlled, I think, with the
Hmm.
way that they play the game and they see the game. They slow it down for themselves, yeah, and they do things that are, I think, just unorthodox in a way, but it's becoming more and more natural and typical of today's game. Like almost everybody's got that kind of advanced deceleration
Hmm.
step now, which is just kind of like a way that this game has mute morphed, I guess, over time, like learning how to um, leverage changes in speed, but not just getting up to speed, but how to slow things down and take advantage of that too. So, anyways, his style of play is unique, Jokic's is, and it's been, I mean, just an absolute joy to watch. And yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I think like I was thinking back to this while you were talking. If I was going to say that I've never seen a player like Jokic in my lifetime in terms of like the inevitableness of him. But then I was like, yeah, I kind of have watched LeBron's whole career. Um, so I think we forget 2013 LeBron was just on another level on all kinds of like physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. Um, but yeah, the intentionality of those guys you named, we'll put our guy from the Pistons, Cade Cunningham, in there too.
yes,
Just guys who play at their own speed. And it's very indicative to me of the pace and space style of play we have nowadays. I missed the prime of Larry Bird's career. I would have loved to be going to Celtics game at the Garden in the 80s when it was rocking with Bird and all those guys. Uh, and I've gone tried to go back and watch those games, and you watch those games, and they're posting up three people and one person spacing to the short corner, and one guy's trying to throw an entry pass, and it's just there is no space. And you mentioned like how that evolved over the years, early 2000s when we were, growing up watching the game, it wasn't as bad. But you needed those freak athletes like Vince, like Tracy McGrady, like Kobe, um, Allen Iverson's a great
Hmm.
example of guys that were just like insanely quick and insanely fast because you had a defender at the opposite free throw line. You had a guy parked in the paint, and you had to get by your man as quickly as possible because the defense was rotating from a much shorter distance. Now you have defenders who they're all the way out to the three-point line. You can just take your time. Tatum does this a lot too. And I'd probably put him in that category too. The older he's gotten, he's kind of developed that the patience to his game.
Yeah.
Like it, you can take your time and get to your spots and not have to worry about the defender. And it's crazy to see how much the game's changed just during our lifetime. I think it's way better now. All the old heads who are like, "Oh, the game's terrible, too many threes, nah, 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 get off my lawn." Try watching old games; it's rough.
It's
Um,
brutal.
the other point I'll just say on Jokic real quick, I would put him as one of the all-time optimizers
Mm.
alongside LeBron, Magic, and Bird, where you put someone alongside him and they're going to have a career year. You mentioned Bruce Brown and how he's fallen off the face of the earth. Monty Morris had a great year with him, and he's
Yeah.
been buried on the bench in his last two stops since leaving him. I love those guys who can just turn like makes the game so much easier for everyone else. Um,
Hmm.
we were talking about the trade deadline. I was kind of like fantasizing about Zach LaVine in Denver.
Oh, yeah.
And like you think of all these guys, it's like, oh, this is their shortcoming. But you have this guy who just alleviates all of that. Today during the game, I was Michael Porter Jr. is having a really good year, and I don't want to deep dive too much into the Nuggets because I feel like that's inevitable.
Hmm.
And we've thrown that around talking about the Nuggets and how they started off this year so bad, and whereas Philadelphia is in the doldrums after their bad start, Denver is second in the West now, and Porter Jr. is having a good year. But you want to talk about a flawed player who had got a gift being drafted by Denver and playing alongside Jokic because that man cannot dribble the ball more than three dribbles. He has no shiftiness to his game whatsoever, but he plays to his strengths alongside Jokic, and it's just beautiful to watch. We won't dive into the MVP. I'm sure Jordan is Team Shea all the way. He might have got Oklahoma City Thunder tattoo on his face as we're speaking, but Jokic is top three in points, rebounds, and assists. I don't know how many times it's happened all time, but I can tell you it's probably not that many. So I think he deserves the MVP this year, but we shall see how the season unfolds down the stretch.
Yeah.
Um, any other thoughts on Jokic or Bird or the style of play?
No, I'm totally with you on Jokic being MVP. I get the Shea stuff. But as we get into our next segment, I got a couple like I would call them honorable mentions because I don't think they quite fit our criteria. That'll kind of hit
Yeah.
on a little more of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, on the shape point, just as a quick aside, I mentioned the number of all-star teammates that Jokic has had in his career. Jalen Williams was an all-star this year. He's already had one more all-star teammate than Jokic has had in his entire career. So, and also to the point on Bird and defensive, all defense. I hate that media votes for these awards. Not all media is created equally. but you hear some of the conversation around MVP and how Jokic shouldn't win it because he's above the MVP conversation or whatever else nonsense they're throwing out. It's just like we need Zach Lowe just deciding the MVP, and that
Yeah.
would make all things right.
Come back, Zach.
So for our next segment, Haley and I are going to name some guys that you casual NBA fans might not know exist, but these are guys who bring value to different teams in their own unique way. Um, Kind of the criteria for this is you know, mostly bench guys, occasional starters, guys who aren't going to be the headlines. Excluded from this list are guys going to be guys like Russell Westbrook, despite the fact that he's coming off the bench. He's a former MVP. People know who he is. Along those same lines, Naz Reid. We love Naz Reid. Future All-Star Naz Reid. I think he's going to get a bag next summer. I think his agent agrees with me on that. But enough people know who Naz Reid is, reigning sixth man of the year. Such a fun player. And I put Trey Murphy on that list too, because I also think he's going to be a future All-Star. Durham's own Trey Murphy. Also, Jason Tatum said he's going to be an All-Star next year. That dude is another guy who is super fun to watch. Flamethrower from outside, crazy hops.
He,
Um,
on the all uninsured ankles team, like
a hundred
the
percent.
some context to how this podcast got started. We basically tried to build our own team using cap rules and reasonable expectations of a team, and we like all agreed we had to have Trey Murphy.
We started the team with Jokic and Trey Murphy. That was where the team started.
Yeah.
So that should tell
Uh,
you how much we love Trey Murphy. And, like if Zion can stay healthy, man, New Orleans could be something. But Trey Murphy's a big part of that. But we've talked a lot about Trey Murphy. He is not on any of our lists. So, Haley, you want to hit us with your first guy that we're naming, deep cut?
for me, I don't know how deep of a cut it is because I don't know. This is where like context is important because I feel like most of the people I talk to love the NBA and I don't talk to a lot of
Mhm.
people, so that's also important to note. But Tari Eason is who
Mm,
I'm gonna start with. So
I love
um
it.
first thing, he is likely not a household name, mostly because his health has been very up
Mm,
and down since the time he's gotten into the league. But for those who are not familiar with Tari Eason, he is a nightmare of a defender. If you're facing the Rockets and he's healthy, you're gonna have a rough night, and it's not just one player. It's going to be pretty much anybody in that 2 through 4 range. He's gonna see you, and it's not gonna be fun. Uh, a lot of the talk around the Rockets' kind of young core really was building up over Tari and Amin being these elite defenders, and not just defenders, but they play the game the right way. They play incredibly hard, and Tari is a great rebounder. Just
mhm.
an exceptional rebound. He's 6'8", I think like 215 or so. So he's got good size, got really good strength, finishes around the rim, a freak athlete despite having quite a bit of injuries over his short career. But just he's one of those guys every year I'm like, if we can at all, I'm like begging the Hawks to find a way to get him because he's a guy any team can really use, and
Mhm.
they can just plug him in and he'll fill in gaps. Perfect glue guy, and just does all the like connective stuff on a basketball floor. So one of has been for past probably 3 years where I'm like, man, I just need more of this guy in my life. And then every year it's kind of he's had lots of lingering lower body
Mhm.
issues. And anyways, hoping his health will get right consistently, but he's very good and a
Yeah.
lot of fun to watch.
Certified dog. That's one of the favorite things I love about him. Last year he was going at Draymond and the Warriors talking all kinds of mess. And if there's one thing, there's three things I love: Nikola Jokic, the Boston Celtics, and people going at Draymond because that makes for good entertainment. And He so deep cut comparison, deep cut. He reminds me a lot of James Posey, who helped the Celtics
Yeah.
hang the banner in 2008. Just like super tough, super physical defender. Amen Thompson's gotten all the love recently, and rightfully so. I'm a huge
Oh
Amen
yeah.
Thompson guy. But what made the Rockets so good earlier in the season before they kind of hit a little bit of this lull with injuries is Ime was bringing in both Amen and Tari Eason off the bench, and they were just clamping dudes.
Yeah.
There was a game early in the season against Memphis where like looked like he had never dribbled a basketball in his life. It was fun to watch. And if you were a Grizzlies fan, it was rough to watch, but I love that one. My first one, we're going to stay close to my heart with the Boston Celtics. There's a couple guys kind of want to name, but Luke Cornett. I have done a complete 180 on Luke Cornett. A couple years ago, I was completely out on him. He was like super corny with the Cornett contest, and he always like dumb jokes and some of his antics, and I was like, this dude is terrible. Like, what is he doing? But newsflash, Luke Cornett is really good, and super underrated. So he started today, which is perfect timing for this. He started today and did as good a job on Jokic as you can do. It's funny to look at his career. He came in as a stretch five, and you look at like early G League highlights with the air quotes for those listening at home. Stretch five, like mainly about shooting, and now he never shoots outside the paint, but he is physical. He is constantly using his size, getting in people's faces in a like very friendly way. I remember when people talked about Andrew Luck and the way he would talk trash would be like, "Oh, good play, good this, good that." Luke Cornett has a little bit of that to him, where like he'll knock someone to the ground and then he'll help him up. Be like, "Sorry, I didn't mean to like put you on the ground. I just was boxing out." But the thing where he is really important to the Celtics, where a guy like Nemias Queta is not as advanced in this area, despite the fact that like he's bigger and he's more athletic and he's better shot blocker, is Luke Cornett is elite as a short roller. His decision
Mm.
making and his passing, when Tatum's getting trapped at the top or whoever's White's getting trapped, whoever's getting handling the ball out of the pick and roll. He is a great decision maker in the middle of the floor, and super valuable to our offense, despite the fact that he just never shoots now. And it's crazy because he's like a 90% free throw shooter, but he only dunks and only layups. And, you know, he has been really good for us. And, with Porzingis out with his health and Al Horford being 75 years old, Cornette's been super important to the season, and yeah, I gotta shout him out as my first guy that I'm naming because a couple years ago I was completely out on him.
I thought we were gonna avoid Homer picks today, but sometimes I should have known with Josh that he was gonna bring a Celtics player with him. Um, but yeah, no gripes with Cornette being a one of these highlighted role players. He's obviously he became a name in households because of his silly Cornette contest, even though it was statistically like functional contest, even though he's 8 feet away from the defender or the offensive player, but still, um, obviously been a good contributor for them. The fact that he's on the court, has a contract, and is typically playing somewhere at least 15 or so minutes, even when their main bigs are healthy. He's their guy their third big that they have to have, and
Mhm.
makes their bench, more palatable, at least for the bigs. I have, you know, other feelings about fast PP and uh some other bench players on the Celtics, but yeah, he's certainly come around and developed over the past couple years, and plays, like you said, plays within himself and plays super hard. Like, dude is all over the place, and um yeah, he's always frustrating for me when I watch him play the Hawks, because I know he's going to out rebound Capella, even though like Capella looks like a much sturdier guy than
Mhm.
Luke Cornett. And I'm like, dude, you're just getting outworked by this guy. can box out, please. Um, anyways.
Yeah, he is one other thought on him is bench uh rotations with Tatum. So Tatum, Cornette, Hauser, Pritchard, and usually Derek White are some of the best statistical lineups in the league. And part of that is because of Cornette's chemistry with Tatum. They play great in the pick and roll, great in the two-man game. And yeah, I gotta shut him out. I was not a fan. I was not a fan. I hated that Cornette contest, and he's reined it in the last couple of years. But yeah, gosh, shout him out. Who's your next guy, Haley?
Well, I actually have a little trio here,
Ooh.
so I'm only going to do a deeper dive on one of them, but the trio of Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, and Cason Wallace. I'm going to do a deeper dive on Aaron Wiggins, but first, Isaiah Joe, I know I've talked about him on the pod before, but freak athlete, great three-point shooter,
Mhm.
around 40% over the last 3 seasons and just like a microwave off the bench for OKC. Cason Wallace, disgusting defender, lockdown, and just a lot to handle as a guard. And very, again, like another freak athlete, can fight through contact. He is developing the jumper. I know it was kind of a thing that was keeping him off the floor last year, but it's certainly making him more playable this year. I think he's gotten a couple starts due to injury this year, but I love Cason Wallace. Just again, a lot of fun to watch. Very quick, very snappy off the floor, and just again an awesome defender. But Aaron Wiggins was one of those guys. I'm pretty sure he was kind of floundering around in the G League for a bit, and then um, has just like really blossomed in Oklahoma City. An awesome three-point shooter. And I mean, I know I use glue guy. I don't want to like use that too loosely, but he's the guy who does everything for them. He gets buckets in meaningful times. He can be the guy who takes on really tough assignments from, again, like pretty much 1 through 4 because he's got the size, the length, and the quickness to do it. And just like seems to always be doing the right things. And I think that, you know, it's easy to overlook guys who just don't make mistakes.
Mhm.
And for me, that's something that like when you have such a young core, having a guy who plays with such a high level of maturity and plays the game the right way, very unselfish, but like the dude just had a 40-point game.
Mhm.
I
He's a
think
household
maybe
name now.
well, yeah, that's fair. Has a big time 40-point game, and I think if I remember correctly, he's had like 12 straight double-digit games, something along those lines. Three double doubles in the last 12, and 3 24-point plus games, and then that 141 point game. So he's he's very good. I was not. Like I just thought he was kind of a flash in the pan guy last year. Did not think he was gonna be sticking on the roster. Thought that Kaysen, Isaiah Joe, Caruso, Dort, I thought that all of them would kind of push his minutes away, and he's just getting more and more playing time and earning it. Like just again, just doing all the right things. He plays the way that the Thunder want to play, which is that, you know, drive and kick, and he can do both sides of that. He's good at getting downhill. He's good at getting the ball out, and he knows where to be in space. And it's just an awesome defender and allows Shea to be in passing lanes, and Jalen Williams can take a break from having the toughest defender or toughest defensive assignment. Same thing for Caruso and Dort. Like he's able to give them. I mean, it's a nightmare to play the Thunder right now. That's again just that's kind of my tidbit on why I think maybe that takes away a little bit from Shea because he's not necessarily making all of those role players that much better. They just are fitting within the system that Dagnall's built. And Shea is a very important part of that system. Don't get me wrong, um, but yeah, he's there's Aaron Wiggins is an awesome piece that I don't think anybody really foresaw being as good as he's been.
Yeah. The Thunder are so annoying. Like everything just works out for them. Like Sam Presti just like must fall asleep and wake up in Scrooge McDuck's vault because like everything they do works out. And I'm annoyed. I'm openly annoyed by the Thunder. But yeah, Aaron Wiggins is the better Wiggins potentially. Um, I've never been the biggest fan of the old Andrew, but yeah, he's another guy. Like the Thunder just have so many of those like 3-and-D guys, and like you said, he might be the best one right now, honestly. Um, and you'd love to see it. One of the best contracts in the league too. Like they signed him this offseason to a super t team friendly deal. Um, so anti Paul George in that regard. Um, yeah, enough on
Oh.
the Thunder. I'm openly annoyed with them. My next guy, funny enough, has a connection to the Thunder. This is a guy I love for a few years. My favorite in the Gilgeous Alexander family, and that would be Nikhil Alexander Walker up in Minnesota. One of just a fun guy who is additive, kind of like you were just talking about with Wiggins. He
Mhm.
doesn't make mistakes and plays within himself. A lot of times plays backup point guard for them. Really unique in the way he passes. He's a righty shooter, but does a lot of lefty passes.
Huh.
And it's just the type of thing that stands out when you're watching on the court. And he's got some good size to him. He's like 6'7". Like I said, good defender. One of the reasons why this year hasn't gone the best for Minnesota, but last year their defense was so good because they had so many wing options with Ant and McDaniels and Alexander Walker and Conley's been around for a number of years and has not much tread left on those tires, but to be able to plug in a guy like Nikhil Alexander Walker as your backup point guard and gives them that size to go with that defense is super valuable.
Hmm.
He bounced around a little bit to start his career. Jumper, like I said, it's kind of funky, but it goes in. And that's all, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And it'll be interesting as a complete aside to that. I think Canada can really make some noise in the coming Olympics. And I think a guy like Nikhil Alexander Walker, along with his cousin Shay and all the other Canadian guys, it'll be really interesting to see what they can do in international basketball. But I love Nikhil Alexander Walker. I would love it if the Celtics could get him. He would be a great fit on our bench. But yeah, my favorite of the Gilgeous Alexander family.
Yeah, I watched him play against the Pelicans earlier in the year. Not him, but I watched Timberwolves play against the Pelicans earlier in the year, and the Pelicans have one of the best broadcast crews, by the way.
Mhm.
It's Joel Myers and Antonio Daniels, and they love each other. They like genuinely get along, spend a lot of time together. But when you hear them talk about guys who were in New Orleans and are somewhere else, they, like most commentators, they speak very highly of them, but they were just so impressed with his development because when he was in New Orleans, like I think when he was drafted, he was pretty highly touted. Like they were expecting him to be quite good and just didn't really pan out. Didn't really develop like the offensive feel for the game and really was like just a negative defender for the first few years in his career and then has really transformed in his bench role and has been like awesome for the Timberwolves, like very important for them. I know that you've been very vocal about your enjoyment of Nikhil over the past year and some change, but it's been fun to see because he's always had like some fun skill things to watch, but yeah, he's become such an important piece to them. A semi-tangent to this. Uh, I watched some highlights of a couple of other of their role players today of Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark, who both are also like they're just like high motor guys with
Freak athletes too.
yeah. One of my you were talking about how Nikhil is a righty shooter but does a lot of the passing and dribbling through his left hand. Well, Terrence Shannon is a left-handed player and he does everything with his left hand. I watched him take so many layups with his left hand on the right side, and it wasn't like, sometimes you're doing that to beat your
Hmm.
defender to the cup. He's just doing it. Like it doesn't matter if it's an advantage or not. He's just going up with his left. But he's extremely strong for his
Hmm.
size. Like you can tell he knows how to play through contact. I saw him shoulder Lou Dort into the stanchion, and I was like, okay, like
Yeah.
dudes don't move Lou Dort. Lou Dort moves them, and yeah, it was
Well, we
impressive.
love our lefties who only use their left hand. Shout out to our guy Josh Smith, who I don't think ever used his right hand in his entire NBA career. The other last piece on Nikhil Alexander Walker is he was just a throw-in in the Mike Conley trade.
Mm,
And I love when guys are just like, "Oh, hey, you got a salary that works for this. Here you go. Go to this other team," and then something good happens for them. Because they always talk about the business in the NBA, but um, I like when the business works out for the guy more so than the team.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Your next guy, Haley.
All right. I'm gonna. Oof, I have a couple here that I've talked a lot about, so I'm gonna go with the one I haven't talked about. That's Tumani Kamara. Um, Man, the Blazers on the whole are full of a lot of really fun guys, and
Facts.
I cannot believe that their record is what it is. Just more, this is more like my expectation before the season is still like informing how I feel about the Blazers. But then you watch them play, and every time you watch them play, they play hard for the entire game, and they've
Hmm.
got. I mean, we could list off a ton of guys from that team that are like, oh yeah, he's a lot of fun. He's a lot of fun. Oh yeah, he's a lot of fun. Oh, I forgot about him. He's also a lot of fun. But Tumani Kamara, I'm gonna say it again, but he's their Swiss Army knife. He's their glue
Hmm.
guy. He's the guy who does everything. A defensive like absolute clamps on defense, a very, very good athlete. He's not the best athlete on their team because Shannon Sharp's there, but or Shaden Sharp, my apologies. But yeah, just he's awesome to watch play, and you can tell he just like relishes taking on the defensive assignment. Today he hit a big three in the corner, celebrates from like he was in the corner when he hits it, celebrates from the corner to the hash mark, turns around with a big smile on his face so that he can D up Darius Garland 3/4 court, and I'm like, all right, I like that energy
Hmm.
is amazing. But yeah, he he's he's awesome. He's a ton of fun to watch. And I just want to give a quick shout out. We were talking about style of play earlier. Denny Avdia is one of those
Hmm.
guys who is just like fits that deliberate style. And can do you want him to get you a bucket? Do you want him to make a play for you? But he's going to do it in kind of his time and uh, has a uniqueness to his game. But yeah, that game, by the way, the Cavs uh Portland game today, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Portland is like if you don't know Portland, you need to know Portland because they are coming. They have a ton of dudes who are really fun, who are really good, who are really young.
Hmm.
Chauncey Billups was a absolute train wreck of a coach, and he does some questionable Jason Kidd-esque things as a coach. Those guys need to maybe not play mind games as much with their players, but he's done a really good job coaching those young guys. I was completely out on Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson, not that he need to revive his career because he's like what year two. Like,
Yeah.
come on now, let's give the guy some time to develop. But he's been really good. I mentioned just a minute ago with Alexander Walker about guys being thrown into a trade. Tumani Kamara was thrown in the DeAndre Ayton trade, and how much would Phoenix love to have that guy on their team? Not only is he a terror defensively, like you said, like his scoring has had a real uptick
Hmm.
recently. And Portland's just so good. And I love that you mentioned Portland because the next guy that I have on my list is also from the Portland Trailblazers. And no, it's not Denny Avdia because I love Denny Avdia. And if we were doing this last year when he was in Washington, he 100% would have probably been the first name I called. But I'm gonna go with Delano Banton, Celtic legend Delano Banton. Um, he is a 6'9" point guard who can't shoot. And you would hear that and be like, oh, that guy's not going to work. But somehow it does. He plays a very methodical style, but it's very poor man's Luca meets like slithery, kind of like the way Giannis gets into the lane, mixed with
Mm.
like what we thought Michael Carter Williams was going to be. He's a really unique guy. He's almost I don't want to say elite in the pick and roll, but he is really good in the pick and roll. I hated that the Celtics gave up on him because every time he played, he was just a net positive. And it was really interesting at the beginning of the year. Chauncey was playing him almost as a closer, so much so that Tom Haberstroh wrote an article on him basically is he essentially going to be the Mariano Rivera of basketball players because he would only play in second halves. Um, Chauncey's since disbanded that and he plays them the whole game. Well, not the whole game, but at different points throughout the game. But it was really interesting the way he wouldn't play and then he'd come in, he would just dominate the ball and make great decisions and
Hmm.
just impact the game with this complete change of pace. But yeah, Portland is like the league pass sleeper for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'm glad it's fun how I didn't mention him and then you did mention him, but yeah, just like knows how to make plays. And yeah, like you said, he doesn't like pop off the screen when you're watching him, and
Hmm.
then you'll look down at the box score and you'll be like, oh, his net ratings plus 15, and he scored 14, had a handful of assists and a couple rebounds, and didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I he does have like a I'll call it a goofiness a little bit
Hmm.
to the way to his style, but it works. And that's the thing, like a lot of coming back to our style of play, it's been an unintentional running theme tonight, but the way that the game has developed, I think people train this stuff now. Like,
Hmm.
back in the day, it's like, oh, this is just like this is just how a guy plays. And, they came into the league like that and we didn't train it out of them. And now it's like, no, guys are like figuring out ways to make things that are unorthodox natural for them and
Hmm.
makes it really difficult to prepare against. Like, how do you guard somebody who you don't really know what they're going to do? That's at least like kind of my mentality with it. And you know, kudos to the people who are these guys trainers because they're putting them in situations that like allow them to be a lot more creative and develop skills that like we aren't used to at the very least and some things that we just hadn't seen. But yeah, Delano, a lot of fun. But yes, I
Yeah.
also agree. If you haven't watched the Trailblazers this year, just go watch some of the condensed games and just enjoy
Hmm.
the play. It's they got a lot of guys.
Yeah. And surprisingly, they didn't make a move at the trade deadline. But I thought they were going to be sellers for sure, but they held on to all their guys. One other guy I want to mention who doesn't meet the criteria because he was a top five, top 10 pick. Donovan Clingan is massive. Like guys that big stand out in a league full of
Hmm.
gigantic men. And he is just massive. He's mobile. He's shooting threes occasionally now. Uh, like Portland is going to be something for real down the road. I know that I said that once, but I'm just super excited about Portland.
Yeah, I get a lot of Houston 2, 3 years ago vibes.
Hmm.
Like it feels like it's coming, and
Yeah,
they probably still have some prospects that are going to be joining this
yeah,
current group. And um, Yeah,
Cooper
they'll.
Flag.
I don't know about. We'll see. We
Yeah,
know he's destined for San Antonio now, so or Utah.
he's going to Utah. All right, Haley, hit us with your next guy.
All right. So I'm going to I'm going to throw in a couple honorary mentions and then hit you with kind of my last one, who's kind of the king of role players for me right now. First honorary mention are the initials of AN duo in Indianapolis. As you know, if you're a frequent listener, I cannot stand the Pacers. I belovedly call them the Fakers, and Andrew Nemhard and Aaron Nesmith are the
Yes.
reason they are not fake. Like other let me not do Pascal an injustice. Pascal is has been incredible this year, but Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nemhard make that team tick. They are the kind of like heart and soul of the team. They play their butts off. They do all the right things. They can get buckets when you need them to. They get important rebounds, important stops on the defensive end. Very completely different players in terms of what they're actually doing or in their positions. You got Neesmith, who's more of like a small ball four. Um, doesn't really play the three, even though that's probably his natural position. He just, I don't know, that's not necessarily his best role. But then you got Nimhard, who's, I think the whole reason that Tyrese Halliburton works on that team is because Nimhard is his sidekick, making sure that his defensive liability isn't as much of a liability. And same thing for Neesmith. But anyways, can't stand the team, but those guys are awesome. And um, my next one, Najee Marshall. I love Najee Marshall. Y'all have heard me talk about Najee Marshall probably every episode because I just try to slide him in any chance I get. He's another guy, kind of got this like herky jerky style of play on offense, but um, just can do a little bit of everything. His shooting still needs to come around. That's kind of like the last thing. If his shooting can get up to 36, 37% from three, I think it can take him a lot further along and be a much bigger asset for Dallas, but awesome defender, can run an offense if you need him to, and knows how to get downhill and play through contact. But just a big fan of Najee. And this is also a little bit begrudging, but this is the guy I got to shout out for like the fifth time on our podcast, and he's the guy who I'll end my who's who of role players, and that's Ty Jerome.
Hmm.
Um, Ty Jerome came into the game against the Celtics on was that Friday night, and he doesn't do anything like super crazy, but he hits a couple of big threes, set like just slows the pace of the game down for the Cavaliers.
Mhm.
And like you can tell that when he's on the court, number one, he's bringing it on defense and he can guard up to the three in a pinch if you need him to. If the guy's like not too big, but he's kind of a lot to guard for ones and twos because he's pretty long and he's strong. And then he's also able to run the offense and he can space the floor. Like if you sit him in a corner, you can't leave him. But he's also a guy who's like crafty enough and sees the floor so well that, I don't know, he's just going to find space and find open people if he's got the ball in his hands. And um, he's been so frustrating for me to watch because every time I watch him play, I'm like, you're not making that again. You're not making that like you get halfway, you're not even all the way to the lane. You get like one step inside the free throw line, you get bumped off your spot, you throw up a left-handed floater, and it's nothing but net. And it's like repeatedly. And at this point, I'm like, all right, this is his game. This is who he is. And then he's also, again, he's able to stretch the floor and he's just frustrating as crap on the defensive end. It's just super smart player. You don't see a whole lot of guys coming out of Virginia who actually become what you expect them to. But he and DeAndre Hunter are, like kind of proven that thought wrong, and they're doing it together, which is kind of fun. Shout out to DeAndre, but they both had very good games today against the feisty Portland squad, and they were down 10 to 15 for much of the game. And credit to to them for really being the reason that they made it back into that game. So yeah, Ty Jerome, elite role player, probably one of the like the best non-six man guy in the league right now.
Yeah. I think Cleveland has shown us this week they can come back from down from a deficit. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, Ty Jerome's, like everything you said, super helpful when you can have a guy come in and let your guys, your big scorers, Mitchell and Garland, get off the ball and cook whoever they're playing, as is the case and happened on Tuesday. Ty Jerome was
hmm
running the offense, and Mitchell and Garland were just getting the ball and roasting whoever was guarding us. Um, yeah, he might be the reason why I've been out in Cleveland all year, but I'm starting to come around because they are a legitimately good team. Um, I I won't hit the Najee Marshall point because I am boycotting Dallas as the entire Republic of Slovenia is. But the two Indiana guys, we have Celtic legend Aaron Smith, who I would describe his style of play as a kamikaze. Uh, I am
That's
surprised
so good.
he hasn't suffered a major injury because he plays so hard. I love that dude. I loved him when he was with the Celtics, even though he shot negative 10% from the 3-point line. But he might be the hardest playing guy in the league. I haven't deep dived that list, but he just plays insanely hard. And Nemhard was the best player in the Eastern Conference Finals, hands down, for the Pacers. It wasn't Halliburton, it wasn't Pascal, it was Nemhard who torched us, almost, won a couple games for them until Drew Holiday, flexed some of that clutch defensive play that he's been known for. Um, but yeah, those two guys are definitely, definitely the type of guys who will contribute to a championship at some point.
hmm
Like I don't know if it would be in Indiana, but I could totally see like Neesmith with, you name the team. Denver, the Lakers probably. He seems like the perfect guy to pair with Luca and LeBron. That would just be amazing for a championship run. Um, but yeah, I still love Aaron E. Smith. One of the guys we gave too early on,
Yep.
and one of my last cuts from my list. Um, I will finish it out with a couple guys. Go rapid fire. Two guys who I love, who both hail from Georgia, that is the Republic of Georgia, Gogo Bitadze and Sandro Mamukelashvili. Bitadze's with the Magic, spot starter when Wendell Carter Jr. is out. And he's a guy who comes from Mega Basket, so same year Serbian team that Jokic is from. And he is another guy who doesn't make mistakes. Um, he also, in the games I've watched, I thought profile more as a 3-point shooter, has a little bit of spacing, but then when I looked at the numbers, that is not the case. But at least he looks like a shooter, so maybe that's all that matters. And this is the guy most famous for at the draft. He was seated alongside Zion, and Zion had a million reporters next to him, and he didn't have a single person interviewing him. But he's a great fit on that Magic team. Great with their bench. They've been decimated by injuries to literally everyone on their roster this year. But with him, he and Cole Anthony and Mo Wagner, they made a great bench unit when healthy. Um, Mamu. I wish he would get more minutes for the Spurs. He was playing a fair bit last year before they revamped their whole roster, but to me, he's just a vibe. It's the leftiness, it's the tattoos, it's the style of play. Like when he catches the ball, the shot's going up. Like he is attacking, he is shooting. There's no in between. He most famously had a breakout at Summer League for the Bucks and was just dunking on everyone. Um, Probably plays the least amount of minutes of anyone on either of our lists. But whenever we're naming guys, I gotta mention him. Um, Another guy that I want to mention is Santi Aldama, the only Spanish guy in the NBA. You want to talk about a country with great basketball heritage? It's España. And surprisingly, I've mentioned him a couple times, but he's the only Spanish player in the league currently. And Memphis is really the only team that plays this way where they allow all five guys to attack the basket. It's not like, the Lakers or the Celtics or even Denver where it's a lot of pick and roll. It's a lot of dribble handoffs. Memphis is kind of swings it and lets them attack, lets all their guys attack. Maybe not Zach Edey, but the rest of the guys catch it and go.
Hmm.
And Santi's just has so many skills. Like he's one of those guys who's whatever that expression is. He's a master of none, but he's just good at everything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Put up some really good numbers at the start of the year when Jaren was out, and they were just decimated by injury to start. And just a super fun guy. Like he could go off for 30 at any night, and can do it all. Smart player too. But the guy I wanted to end with, specifically because you said we weren't naming homers, is a guy from your Atlanta Hawks, the minivan, the G-Wagon, George Niang. I love George Niang. He is an inspiration to everyone who is possibly slightly out of shape, maybe not the greatest athlete, the type of guy who, you're not the quickest, you're not the strongest. You're George Niang. And he's just one of my favorite players in the league. The way he doesn't take himself too seriously, but is also like tough as nails. We'll get into it with anyone. The jumper's a little funky, the way he kind of does like a cross split when he shoots it, despite being like fairly big. But it's just a fun guy to have on your team, a winning player. Another one of my guys, if I'm making a list of role players I want on the Celtics, Massachusetts native George Niang is at the top of the list.
Yep. I'm not going to cover, well, for one, Goga's getting boycotted by all Atlanta fans right now because he's a punk when he plays the Hawks. If I hadn't watched him play the Hawks recently, I probably would have had something nice to say. Mamu Mamu reminds me of like Pero Antic if Pero Antic
Mm,
was athletic. Um, so like Pero Antic 2.0. Aldama was on my list. He's actually the first person on my list, but because he started I think 12 games this year. So I decided to leave him off somewhat for time's sake, but I love that you talked about him because yeah, just skilled at everything. Yes,
mhm,
not elite at any one particular thing, but man, he's a great fit in Memphis, and I'm glad that his role has increased this year and deservedly so. And then Niang, yeah, I hated Niang until he got traded to the Hawks, and I'm like, holy crap, George Niang's like really intense when he plays basketball, and then
mhm,
you see him in interviews and like the pregame stuff, and he is for like in the same way that you mentioned Mamu, he's just a vibe. Like you can tell um he's a good guy to have around the locker room. You can tell he like loves the game, but also is like recognizes like we play basketball for a living. This isn't
mhm,
anyways, but yeah, he's a good hooper. Dude, and he is also somebody who's like actually really skilled as an offensive player, not just a shooter.
mhm.
But yeah, shout out to G-Wagon.
He will forever be the minivan in my heart. Underrated defender too. Like that's the thing. Like he is not quick by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a physical, tough defender. The type of guy that my guys Jalen and Jason do not do well against. But yeah, George Niang, come home, come to the Celtics.
I
Alrighty, Haley. Anyone else we want to name?
think that's it for me.
Alrighty, well, it's been fun. More OKC Thunder talk than I thought we were going to get with no Jordan. I'm sure next time might be entirely about OKC. Hopefully they'll lose, maybe two games between now and then. For now, keep your friends laced up tighter than your ankle braces. Have a good night, y'all.